Hello, my name is Steve D'Agostino, and my co-host Anne Fernald and I welcome you to the Twice Over podcast, because to teach is to learn twice over. In this episode, Failures Are Opportunities, Anne and I are joined by Sam Kann, CIO of Andrews University, who talks with us about leadership, empathy, and collaboration.
I'm so happy to be back in this new season of the Twice Over podcast. Our big bad for this season is leadership. And in that spirit, we're really happy to welcome Sam Kann, who's the Chief Information Officer at Andrews University. He's got over 23 years of experience in the IT industry, and he's really a visionary and resourceful enterprise technology architect. And he's known for delivering solutions at scale. He's providing both strategic and tactical leadership for company-wide IT services, and those include product development, security compliance, vendor management, and cloud computing. So beyond that, he's the founder of Susuyu. I hope I'm pronouncing that. Is that okay?
It's a CCWE, as in
CCWE.
yeah,
Oh,
yes.
CCWE. And my call life creative platforms that reflect his passion for fashion design and his commitment to helping K through 20. Oh, I love K through 20 students achieve career goals. So you can hear from all of this from CCWE. I was going to say CCC, CCWE, to his work as a chief information officer. We have a lot to talk about in terms of leadership with Sam, and I'm really delighted that our interest in leadership and Steve's networking have brought us together for this conversation on the Twice Over podcast. So Sam, welcome. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks for that super intro. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I hope I live up to all of that. So
I'm
thank
sure
you for
you
having
will.
me this afternoon.
I should say also that Sam has hundreds of thousands of TikTok followers, so that we should put that out there as well.
Thank you. I have a leadership TikTok that I do contents when I get a chance. Yeah, thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
So the reason, just to fill you in, Sam, to get a sense of what we've been talking about, Ann and I are thinking about, with the increasing integration of technology into all aspects of university life, we're wondering about the future of the CIO and what the future of leadership at colleges and universities will look like. So one of the things that started me thinking about this, and Ann and I spoke about this in episode 2 of this season, was that I was entering campus and I saw a robot lawnmower. And I was thinking, I wonder if the provost knows or cares about this robot lawnmower. And it occurred to me that the CIO must know, right? It's technology, it touches the network, there's a vendor involved and a vendor agreement, and there's security concerns. And what if the robot lawnmower becomes self-aware and gets loose on campus? What are the risks involved? And who would be responsible?
Yeah, CIO knows everything. No, I'm just kidding.
So what are your thoughts about kind of the CIO having a, a much broader view of a university or college than a provost or other more traditional academic leader might have?
The CIO role has been evolving for decades, right? You have so many C-suites, if you think about it, from CIOs to CTOs to CPOs, and it is very situational. So as a CIO within my own domain, I sometimes wear a chief technology officer hat, sometimes the chief product officer hat. It all depends on what the ask is. So it's a constant evolution in a good way. Back in the day, the CIO shop was looked at as an utility, right? It was a line item in pretty much every campus. And now that technology is embedded in everything that we do, every aspects of our life, CIOs, they've coined the term CIOs and CTOs and whatnot, and it has taken a shape because it manages the strategic initiatives, the tactical initiatives, the innovation hub, the data governance, you name it, the cybersecurity. There's so much involved within the technology dimension for a given campus. So the ever expanding role of CIO in higher education pretty much reflects the evolving demands of technology. For instance, the lawn mowing robot that's out there, right? That is at scale. So if I storyboard this a little bit, you're looking at, to start off, you're looking at the strategic leadership element of it. From IT support to institutional strategy, how is the CIO role expanding, right? So if you look at the present state of affairs, the CIOs are now key contributors to the overall strategy of the institution. Let it be aligning technology initiatives with the university mission to the long-term goals. They're heavily involved. And going back to the lawn mowing robot, that is innovation happening in real time, if you look at it, right? So there's that innovation and digital transformation that CIOs are heavily involved in, because they are at the forefront of introducing new technologies that enhance teaching, learning, and research, right?
I feel like, Sam, the way you're laying this out, it seems much bigger than my conception of the robot lawnmower and a sense of really deeply understanding the institution.
Mm-hmm.
When we were warming up the podcast, you talked about this idea of the center of excellence. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So here we just touched on the cybersecurity piece. So now we are here having this podcast. Who's managing the security aspect of it? We have the network infrastructure team, and we have the chief information security officer monitoring the Andrews networks. So they are the center factor. They are the experts in what they do. It could be a one-person team or multiple individuals involved in this, in a task or a project or an ecosystem. So the center of excellence here, we use cybersecurity as an example. There's that individuals who are assigned to monitor our network, monitor our infrastructure, to make sure they're able to continue to balance the risk, the overhead, and the cost. I hope I answered your question, but that is how the Center of Excellence model, in a very simple format, that's how it works.
Can you say, that's so interesting, and I'm coming at this from a faculty perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, when you were introducing all the domains in which CIO needs to be cognizant on top of things, right? Whether it's bringing new technology to campus, picking the vendor, or thinking about data governance or data security, or thinking about the university strategy and tactics. What do you think the ideal role of a CIO in terms of collaborating with faculty and talking about faculty should be? And where are the places in those buckets? Where are the places where you find the most tricky friction points with faculty?
So one of the biggest roles that CIOs play is the collaboration and partnership piece, right? CIOs are increasingly collaborating with other university leaders, departments, external partners to align technology initiatives with broader institutional priorities and to foster innovation through partnerships. So at the end of the day, especially when working with faculty, the idea is to empathize. That's a word, the term that I heavily use these days. So building collaboration and partnerships is when, as a CIO, I'm able to align with my fellow colleagues in the academic area, in the administrative area, able to align with the parents and students. So when we say aligning, we should be able to also empathize. We should be able to listen, lean in and listen to their stories and able to align with that. Working with faculty and building partnerships is one of the steps, measurable steps that a CIO should and could take, is really aligning with them. So when you're pitching a new technology, when you're pitching a change, a cultural shift, it goes a long way. First, leaning in and listening, understanding their pain points, understanding their critical thinking outcomes, all of those factors into the discussion, and really bringing all that together is one of the key things, again, leaning in and empathizing and aligning before you pitch or recommend something, a change, a cultural shift, or a new solution. So I think that's where that comes in regards to collaboration partnerships.
Can you talk a little bit about how you approach that from the leadership perspective? Because one of the pain points that I think we see at Fordham is when there's a necessary change, right?
Mhm,
Let's say
mhm,
Google just changed its storage recommendations, right? Google Drive used to have unlimited storage. It no longer has unlimited storage. All summer long, we've been getting messages from Fordham's IT department saying, you may have 75,000 gigabytes stored on your Google Drive. You're going
mhm,
to have to get it down to 12 by this date certain. And that's coming from Google. That's not coming from our team, but we can't afford to pay for unlimited storage anymore. There are a lot of things like that, whether it's a change of the LMS, Blackboard does an upgrade,
mhm,
and all of a sudden it looks different.
mhm,
Google decides the storage has changed. And your job as CIO is to communicate that to people. And often I would imagine you're communicating something where the choice is not really a choice. And so, how do you approach these ideas of empathy and alignment when you're in a difficult position of communicating what probably sounds to most faculty members like bad news, right? All your Blackboard courses are going to be need to be reformatted, or all those things you've stored in this way need to now be stored in another way.
We would need to not only approach the problem or the situation at hand, saying that, hey, this is a step we are taking, but we also need to be comprehensive to a certain degree, meaning we need to understand the primary goal here of the change and what are the implication or the ripple effects from that. So what do we have in place as to handle those ripple effects, those low-hanging fruits, let it be from data storage to security, to name it, compliance measures, to access, all of that. So when approaching, this is the step we're taking because the vendor we are using, in this case, Google, is making some changes, and we have no other way but to take these measurable steps. Then we also need to have a clear pathway or roadmap for those ripple effects. And when you have that, the idea here is, end of the day, to there's that element of fear when it comes to data. There's an element of fear when you're thinking about content delivery, and when technology changes are happening. So really not only helping the faculty or other constituents to understand, hey, we're having this change, we got to make this change, there's no other way. But however, no worries, don't be afraid. We have you covered with these other steps to capture these various other issues or concerns that you have. So having that kind of conversation from the get-go is important. Having a champion on your side, when you talk about collaboration, you're going to house it with transparency. So having that transparent dialogue from the get-go to understand the good, bad, and the ugly, to help the constituents understand why we are doing this and what's the need, and this is why. And any other concerns you may have, let's talk about it and let's identify solutions for it. So when that time and date and time comes, we can apply this new solution and with minimal risk and minimal impact.
It seems to me that sometimes there's a lack of understanding about why technological changes are made. And some of these changes have to do with legal requirements in terms of data protection and security. Some of them are technological advancements. Some of
Mhm,
them has to do with like obsolescence.
mhm,
And so the rate of change in technological development can sometimes outpace the users of that technology.
True.
So they're often feeling behind. Just when I'm feeling like my teaching or research environment is stable, here comes this new change. And as the public face often of that change, IT and the CIO,
Mm,
how do you experience that lack of understanding, which can often be perceived from perhaps the faculty perspective as a lack of transparency, that
mhm.
Sam is just doing this because he wants to?
So I shouldn't be going in and going to, and as a chief information officer, going to the president's council and saying, this is what we got to do, or to the faculty or the board of trustees and saying, this is what we got to implement. It doesn't work that way. The idea is shared governance. So that's a big part. If a given institution doesn't have a strong shared governance in place, I encourage folks to think about it, put together a shared governance model, because that leads to innovation at scale in a very fast way. And it also helps create that center of excellence at the macro and the micro level. It helps to create decision making much faster. It helps to understand strategic planning for a given university at a much better rate. So before we can empathize or promote that cultural shift or understanding of each other, that shared governance helps you to realize that you're part of the solution. So really going in and listening at the faculty senate, even individual conversations with faculty, getting to know the faculty of each departments and the chairs and the deans, and being part of dean's council, for instance. So that shared governance is what would drive these days. If innovation needs to happen at that micro level, you need to have that kind of partnership being built. So that's what I would highly recommend any CIOs, for that matter, within the technology landscape.
That's great. That's really interesting. And I'm wondering if you have examples of specific moments or specific vendors or products that you rejected or adopted based on a conversation with faculty. I know Steve and I, especially during COVID, when everyone was teaching online, we had a lot of conversations. Steve and I worked in the middle of a lot of these conversations, and it's not all negative. Sometimes faculty would come to us with something, they were super excited about this tool, and we'd take it to IT, and IT would say, this has no security. As fun as it is for this professor, we cannot adopt it at scale. And similarly, IT would say, this looks really promising. And we'd show it to some faculty members and they'd say, this is solving a problem that we don't have. And so can you share with us if you have any stories like that
Sure.
of times when conversations with faculty have changed your perspective one way or another on a specific, especially like technology that affects us in our research or in the classroom?
We have about 58 or so products at Andrews. Do we need all of the products? Probably not. Do we have the right products in place? Probably not. Do we have some products that really work? Yes, we do. Do people, when they go to conferences and come back, bring additional products to look at? Yes, they do. We have a combination of things involved here. One of the first measurable steps that we took here, and it's been close to 2 years since I've started here at Andrews. And one of the things that we have done is really map out our ecosystem, the technology ecosystem, from a product lens, right? So you have to understand your product stack. So this product is just not working out for us. I'm in conversation with the faculty and the deans. So which system do we keep, right? Can we scale that piece, right? So that is to quote an example of how conversations are happening, not only with the Dean's Council, but also with several faculty who are involved as part of that, or because there are faculty champions also who are involved in various products and technology solutions that need to be part of that conversation. So if I go in there guns blazing and say, hey, we're just going to go to self-service banner and use that, it's not going to sit well. It's not at scale or it's not sustainable. It may serve as a band-aid, but it's not sustainable. So that's where the CIOs got to wear that hat of empathy, that hat of leadership, that hat of listening in, and really bringing these parties together, not only the vendors, but also the constituents. So vendors play a big part in that. We don't usually touch on that subject matter, and that from the contract to negotiation to training. You have products and people lose track of training. They need to be retrained. There's a lot involved. So that is an example that's presently happening here at Andrews, where I'm bringing the parties together and really having that conversation. Shared governance is the word, or 2 words, or however you say it. It's huge. And if an institution is lacking in shared governance, as a technology leader, I can't say enough of you got to have that like yesterday.
So sometimes I feel like, let's say the 3 of us want to go to dinner, and I suggest, I want Italian food, Sam, you want sushi, and wants to get steak.
I know we can agree on Indian food. I know two of us were planning to go to get some
I,
Indian
I
food.
I love Indian food. I think Ann loves Indian food too. Who doesn't love Indian food, really?
Yeah.
But anyway, so we can't agree. We can't agree on where to go. So we go to Golden Corral. It's going to be really mediocre, but everybody's going to get something that's some representation of their preference. But in that representation may or may not be satisfying, but we can make the argument that everyone got something that they wanted. So sometimes I feel with larger tools, like your banner example,
Mhm.
or a tool like Panopto, or a learning management system like Blackboard, they're
Mhm.
huge. They do
Correct.
all of these different things. They solve a lot of infrastructure problems, right? It's one
Correct.
vendor, it's one contract.
Mhm.
All the tools are in sort of one ecosystem, so it's easy to
Mhm.
manage. It
Mhm.
fits into this like Jenga construction I have. It's a little block I can put in there.
Mhm.
But you get like a satisficing solution, right? It's these sort of solutions that can sometimes appear to be solving imperatives that are outside of the teaching and learning environment, right? Like I deal with this tool, even it's an institutional solution, and I end up as an individual user finding my own solution, which looks better for me. And that has all kinds of implications for data security, for management, and for the sense that whoever's making these decisions about the teaching and learning infrastructure, the
Mhm.
technology piece of
Mhm.
it, doesn't really care about me as a teacher so much as these other imperatives of security and contracting and acquisitions and so on. So is
Mhm.
this something that you hear or have experienced, that kind of disconnect?
If I understand your question here correctly, the way I would like to approach that is collaboration necessarily doesn't mean it's just a participation. Collaboration means we come together, put our critical thinking hats on, really brainstorm, understand the why, the problem, and how we are going to solve it, look at the options for solving. In most cases, when it comes to technology, there's a big cost factor to it. So understanding the cost factor, understanding the duration of the contract, understanding the compliance piece of it, if there are any compliance needs from GLBA to GDPR to FERPA, you name it, all of those things. Understanding data security and the security access, the access piece of it. So having these kind of conversations and is it at scale and is it sustainable? Does the technology that you're implementing, at least we can house it for a decade? That is the measure I use. Is the technology at scale and is it here for about a decade? Technology shifts so fast. If you're implementing a technology, even if it lasts for a decade, but it's not at scale, then we're going to have more overhead and more problems down the road. So when I talk about collaboration data governance, the idea here is to come together. And some may agree to disagree, but that's okay. You're not in a perfect setting or a perfect world. But the idea is, does it deliver towards the university's mission and goal? So if we are coming together within a shared governance model for a given project or a task or a new technology, we have to see how that's going to help towards those two goals. So I think that's a dimension I want to set here in regards to your question is it goes beyond just a participation. So whoever it is, whoever the constituents are who are part of that shared governance or that collaborative task, they got to put on that hat of we are here for this purpose, and do I add value to it? At the end of the day, is the other question. Don't waste your time and don't waste the team's time. Just do things that, again, that's a harsh talk. But if we are working towards a goal and a mission, we all have to at some level think what value am I adding to this conversation is important. And I think that's how I would set that up.
That's really lovely, and that's such an interesting and important piece of leadership. And it's so hard, I think, when you're in the day-to-day of doing your work to remember this year or over the next 3 years, these are the 3 institutional priorities that we have. And everything is aimed at those 3 institutional priorities, because of course, each of us in our own individuated lives have other priorities that may not match. And that's okay. That actually, I would say, is a good thing about being at a university, right? Is that someone like myself who's in an English department may have a priority that my students become better close readers of texts that is tangentially related to this, to improving the student experience.
Yeah.
But the nuts and bolts of how I do my piece of that larger thing is really to the side of those giant institutional priorities.
Yeah.
And getting people to step back in some of these cross-departmental conversations where administrators, staff,
You're right.
faculty are
Yeah.
in the same room and say, this is our North Star right now. How is this contributing to our North Star? That can be a really big ask, and it's incredibly important for effective.
I encourage my team, every member of my team, to at least spend about 5% of their time strategically thinking, because we have a tendency to be extremely operational. If you are not a strategic thinker, believe me, you're not at scale. You are operationalizing every day-to-day life, your life, like the growth, right? Even personally, if I need to grow, then I need to be a critical thinker, a strategic thinker about my life and situation. If I'm just operationalizing my life on a day-to-day daily basis, then I'll stay operationalized. I go to work, I come back from work, then I go to gym, I have food prep. It's very operationalized, right? So I think to add to what you just shared is
Yes.
that it is important for everyone, no matter in what capacity you are serving the institution, that you are a strategic thinker and you intentionally put about 5% is, at least I'm asking for 5%. If you can
So
put
when
10 or 20%, great.
So
You know?
if someone comes to you and they're a new hire and they've never been asked to do this kind of strategic thinking before, and
Mhm.
really, let's say their job is very contained and very operational. Their job is to maintain the leases on the individual laptops for the university, right? There's some guy who's in charge of that, some person who's in charge of that, and say, and the lease for your laptop is up. We're going to put a new thing in. Be sure you back up your data. And they just, their role is operational. They understand their role is operational. And now you're saying to them, I want you to think strategically. What kind of advice, development, resources do you like for helping people take that jump into this strategic thinking role?
Yeah, such a great question. And a person who have never been in that space before and they come into a job which is very operationally driven, or they ask, and then they are now asked, hey, put some time into strategic. Taking your example, if this is understanding the lease, all they need to do is work on renewals and all that jazz. And say they've been doing the same thing for, let's say, 20 years, same lease experience. My question to them would be, of course, again, I would approach the person as a new person, that kind of TLC, because they'll be drinking from the fire hose and whatnot. So that TLC is critical. Empathizing with the growth is critical. So it helps them to grow, and you're there, right? And having them having the right resources and right access is important. Having said all that, my question to the individual would be, or the challenge would be, how can we make this better? Is there an opportunity, right? That's a key word. I don't look at failures necessarily as failures. I look at them as opportunities. There was a time in my life I would think of failures as failures, and I'm blaming myself or somebody else, whatever it may be. Now, if you ask me about that, it's all about opportunities. So my question to the individual as part of the growth formula would be, is there an opportunity to improve this practice or this process? So That is where that strategic thinking comes in.
Hearing you describe your work, it seems like a lot of what you do is teach. Not in a formal classroom setting, but
Right.
I'm not sure, Anne, if that's what you're hearing, but I'm hearing a lot of teaching and learning happening here. Would you agree with that,
Absolutely.
Sam? Is that a lot of what you do?
Yes, I agree with completely. It's a learning experience on a daily basis. And that's how you grow. That's how you become a better leader. Leadership is very situational. And you have to wear, depending on the circumstances, depending on what's asked at that moment in time, you wear that hat and you become that situational leader.
So, Sam, our theme is leadership, but this is a podcast about and for teachers at the university level and really at all levels. And so we always ask at the end of every episode a question about a teacher who's been important to you.
And thanks for that question. How much time do we have? I have so many teachers and mentors in my life that I can share, starting with my grandmother to my mom, who raised 5 children, such a powerhouse. So many things. A grandmother teaching about respect, to grandfather teaching about service. He was in the Indian Space Research Organization, resigned to be an evangelist, a missionary back in India. I was a little kid with a flashlight walking with him through villages and towns. I had the privilege of teaching about service and things, the attitude of service instilled at a young age. I've written a blog in LinkedIn Pulse where I talked about meekness. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. So I talk about how meekness and leadership play hand in hand. Many a times in the US, we think about gentleness as a weakness, but in essence, gentleness and meekness play a big part in leadership. And then shout out to several mentors presently in my life. Mukund Vaidyalingham, he's a chief operating officer and a CIO at College of Southern Nevada, who is a great leader who has been a very great impact in my life. Dr. Sandy Shugart from Valencia College. He may not remember me, but he has been a great influence in my life. And presently, the current president at Andrews University, Dr. John Wesley Taylor, amazing influence. So a lot of, if we had more time, I would share more stories, but that's where I would like to pause. But yes, some great opportunities in my life to experience some of these great leaders.
Sam, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I'm so glad you and Steve are friends and that your friendship has brought us this conversation. And thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you, Anne. Greatly appreciate it, Steve. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can reconnect again to talk on more fun topics for sure.
Yeah, we'll go to Golden Corral. It'd be great. Twice Over Podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spotify, with new episodes appearing each week. For host and guest bios and show notes, please visit our website, twiceoverpodcast.com. You can email us at twiceoverpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening.